for me, this was triggered when God invited me into a process of taking me into a consummation of our relationship in intimacy. He took me from the garden of my heart to the dance floor, to the soaking room, to the bridal chamber. And this was the soaking room part. You know, I'd gone through the sense of knowing I was loved. I'd gone through the sense of connecting with my destiny, but I needed this preparation so I could live in a way which enabled me to fulfill who I was, which I would have never have done without that separation and reintegration.
I do have a half-baked question. As simple as this might be, I'm just curious, Mike, when you engage, like in particular, when you engage angels or when you engage the cloud of witnesses, I know a lot of people have different ways in which they do that. Can you share with us? You know, probably it varies from time to time, but maybe give us a little sense of what that means to you and maybe how you go about doing that.
I mean, for me, it's just part of my life. So I don't really do anything to engage other than choose to engage. So generally, I wouldn't engage angels, cloud of witnesses, without having received that out of the Father's heart, or they might engage me in any particular way. But as my relationship with God has deepened, and as I have come into a deeper sense of oneness and union, there's less engagement as an activated thing and more of a lifestyle that I'm continually in communion. Therefore, there may well be some experiences where I meet angels, or angels come and meet me. But it's not me specifically thinking, oh, I'd like to go and meet some angels. I mean, there may be occasions, and there are occasions, where I talk to my angels and engage my angels who operate around me in this realm. And they are here as ministering spirits. Therefore, there I can give them assignments to do things. But generally, a lot of what I have learned to do over the years in the realms of heaven, I am now doing multidimensionally, non-linearly all the time. So I don't generally go and engage unless I really feel the Father leads me into that. I just live in communion and fellowship and then outwork his desires within that multidimensional way. And when you realize that you're not limited by time or space or anything like that, then you're free to be in multiple places doing multiple things at the same time, effectively, in the spirit, without having necessarily to cognitively be aware all the time of what you do. Now, sometimes I become cognitively aware in times like this, where people talk to me and ask me things, and I tell them things that didn't come out of my brain or memory. But they came out of my spiritual engagements and experience and what I'm living in that state of communion and intimacy with. So I share the Father's heart, or I share what I might have been doing or experiencing in that multidimensional way without ever having had the memory of it until I needed the memory of it. So for me, it's much more now of a state of being than going into heaven and doing engagements and actually trying to engage, because I am engaged. You know, I'm constantly face to face, heart to heart with the Father in the realm of light, in the realm of perfection, in which my heart and his heart are joined. Therefore, I am expecting to know his heart. It's not the same. Before, I would have gone to talk to him, asked him things, he would have talked to me, and we've had conversations. Now it's more of a cardiogenosis, knowledge of the heart, which is an infusion in union, which is less sort of, well, I'm going to go and try and do this, or I'm going to go and speak to the Father. Now, sometimes when I engage with a group of people and we go and seek the Father's heart, then that is an engagement. But that, again, is just choice. I just switch my conscious thinking to where I am in the spirit, face to face with the Father, and then I am in that place where I'm aware consciously of what's happening and what the Father is doing or saying or sharing. And then usually in those type of meetings, then we come and feed back and we get a consensus of what the Father is sharing and showing us. And then we go and outwork that. So that's a joint sort of thing where I do that with other people. Whereas in my own daily life, it's just living in that state of conscious awareness of rest, of love, of joy, of peace, of being in him and him in me. Now I am aware of, the desire for rivers of living water to flow in my innermost being and flow around me. And again, I used to activate that every day. I would activate the Merkaba, the energy gates within me. Now I live in that state of activation. So now it's a state of being, rather than I used to learn how to do it and then I would do it. Now I'm constantly in that because it's constantly my desire. It's constantly the place I live within in intimacy with God. And therefore, I don't have to go and do those things now in a conscious way, but I'm still in that state. So I am energized. And sometimes I like just to thank God, show gratitude and thanksgiving of that state. And I'm just so aware of how precious that state is. And I thank him and I'm just joyful over where I've come from and where I am now. In that I enjoy life so much more because I'm enjoying life in that state of awareness. So it's like my life used to be looking at a monochrome existence, and now everything is multicolored and multifaceted and multi-leveled, and I'm aware of so much more within creation and the joy of it than I ever was. But I'm free to enjoy creation because I'm not having to consciously do all those things that I'm doing in the spirit, because I'm doing them in the spirit. I'm consciously engaged in multiple places, doing multiple things in the realms of heaven all the time. And if the Father wants me to become aware of anything, then I do. That knowledge becomes available to me. But I don't have to go and linearly do everything as I used to do. Now all of it is a state of being, which is liberating and joyful, and so much more that I can sense the Father's presence and the fact that I am with him, in him, he's around me, he's in me, in a seamless sort of union of life, rather than doing it by going in activations. Now, I'm not knocking activations because that's where I started and it's where a lot of people are. And therefore, how did I used to do that? Well, the same way as anyone else. Basically, I would think of where I've been and go and engage it. I could think of an open heaven or an open door, or I could think of the river of life is flowing in me. My first gate is open. My first love gate is open. There I can go through that gate. But then I discovered the Merkaba in me has multiple portals within for my consciousness to be connected to anywhere where I am, or anywhere where God wants me and to invite me to participate in him. So that is within. So I'm not, when I started, I was heaven's open, therefore I'm going into heaven through the open door that is Jesus, effectively. And I'm going to go in to engage the ark, or engage the four faces of God, or engage the tabernacle, or go and engage God on the throne or the throne room. And all of those things were choices to engage. So it was just a shift of consciousness. I'm here, my focus is here, and now I'm shifting my consciousness to be focused elsewhere. So it became very easy to do that. But then when I discovered that this is all connected within me also, it didn't really then seem as an external I'm going into heaven. It's almost like, no, I am in heaven. I'm connected to heaven. So it's just a matter of engaging that quantum entanglement. Mm-hmm. Quantum entanglement is basically that your, particles are in two different places or multiple places, but they're instantly connected. There's no time space difference between whether they might be a billion or a light year away, or whether they're a centimeter away. It's instant, because they're not connected in the physical realm. They're connected in the quantum realm, if you like. So I am connected quantumly in my soul and with my spirit, and therefore just seamlessly one. So that's a sort of progression. I had no idea about that to begin with. I was just doing what everyone else did, stepping in, stepping out. Then when I was free, my spirit was not tied to my soul. When I went through the dark cloud experience, and where Jesus separated my soul and spirit and reintegrated me, then I became quantum entangled, and my spirit never left the realms of heaven from that point in February 2012. So I've just become more aware of how it works and how I am connected, and then how instant that connection is. And there's a two-way flow of communication all the time. I'm communicating inwardly with God, and I'm inwardly communicating. So there may be angelic beings within the earth shield or around the throne that I have connection to, because I'm there and I can communicate with them. But generally, it doesn't have to be conscious. If it needs to be conscious, then I can do it consciously. But it's more like being led and guided by an inner union of relationship and heart, rather than, well, I've now got all these things I need to do every day. So
it really does seem like it, maybe in a sense, I was just thinking also something Justin was teaching on, that it's like we're already there. And it's an awakening of one's consciousness, wouldn't you say, Mike?
Yeah.
I mean, in
some
some sense,
I am there, and I am consciously aware of there when I need to be, but I'm also realizing that God engaged us in this realm to enjoy it. Mm-hmm. So many people are so busy with doing all the stuff they think they need to be doing that they don't enjoy the life that God's given. I enjoy creation. I enjoy it. I mean, like looking out the window now and the sun's shining, and, it's winter, but it's a sunny day. I enjoy the fact that I am part of this creation. I enjoy the time that I have to just be with somebody and enjoy being in their presence and enjoy relaxing with them. I enjoy gardening and I enjoy building stuff. I've got a whole massive garden worth of projects that I'm enjoying starting and doing. And God is with me in that, because he's the master gardener. He's the master workman. He's the master creator. So there's a sense of just enjoying fellowship with him in everyday life and doing a whole load of things that in the past I never had time to do, because I was always actively doing something in the spirit or actively doing something, now obviously I do these sessions and I'm talking with people and I'm engaging with people in these sessions, but I've sort of arranged that to have more and more time to be able to enjoy the life that God has given and rejoice in it and celebrate and live loving and love living and live loving and, I'm loved. So that changes, everything. I'm not having to work for anything. I'm not having to try and do anything to earn something, some favor or blessing. I know I'm blessed. I am blessed. And that blessing is an awesome thing, and I live in that blessed state, which means life is so much more enjoyable, so much more joyful, and so much more peaceful, because I'm at peace. I'm at rest in it all.
Justin was actually recently talking about some things related to creation. He was saying that, in essence, that we have the capability right within our DNA to access all of creation. And I'm still processing some of the things that he was saying. So, but he was talking about how space-time is inside of us. I mean, all of this, I'm sure, is getting into, quantum mechanics.
Yeah.
And he was saying that we can access essentially all of the higher dimensions and realms. And, but in any event, emphasizing this idea that we're all seated within heavenly places. He was talking a lot about Jacob's ladder. I don't know if you could flesh that out just a little bit more.
So who was it that was talking?
That was Justin.
Oh, Justin. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, in a sense, that's what I'm saying. I'm connected within. Within me is access and an open portal or portals of connection to everywhere. So I am connected to creation. I feel and sense creation at times. I feel the draw of creation at times to bring sonship into creation, and all of the realms of the spirit right into the realm of eternity, and the Father connected to God there is just connected within me. And it is just a matter of choice to engage it. But I feel less need to engage it cognitively than I used to, because now I'm realizing that I am resident in those places all the time, and all the things that I learned to do over years and years and years, I am doing constantly all the time, because there is no real time in that sense, in the same framework of, well, there are minutes and seconds and minutes and hours and days that are passing here. That is the physical function of time that is a factor of the fact that we're revolving around the sun, and the moon's revolving around us, and all the planets are revolving around the sun, and we're in this sort of motion, which we break up into, years and months and days and weeks and all of that type of time frame. Whereas I don't think we have to think in the spirit, we're not operating in that time frame. I think there is still created time, or an awareness of passage, if you like. It's not all, if we just all lived in eternity, it would all be now and there would be no passage. And therefore, but we're still living in a created universe, and all of the spiritual realms are still created. And I believe they are created with some sense of progression or increase, no end to the increase of his government and peace. So there is a sort of a time perspective, but it's not natural time as in the function of years and months and weeks and days and hours and seconds and minutes and all that. But there is still a sort of sense of progression, and there's still things. But you can live in a quantum moment and it not be linked to time and progression. So I might be let's say I'm in 8 different distinct perspectives from the heavenly realms and dimensional realms and all those things. And within each of those, I might be in, let's say, 10, 12 different locations that I've been to. And in each of those locations, I'm doing something, but I'm doing it simultaneously without the sense of, well, I'm linearly doing this. I am doing all of it. And therefore, I could be in hundreds of different places doing hundreds of different things, all at the same sort of synchronized way, simultaneously, but without me being aware of a passage of any time in it, because that's my state of being rather than my state of doing. I am functioning. And it's also like I learned that time is my friend, and time as a being is there to help me navigate all of this sort of quantum, non-linear, multi-dimensional perspective to reality. And time helped me to see that I am not limited or restricted by my understanding of a time frame, and that one moment can be every moment. Hence, I remember God sort of giving me some missions or things to do, mandates, particularly to do with restoring beings and things. And, being aware that this would take months of my time, and probably I would have to be focused within those months a lot. And therefore, well, I didn't have months of time to give to doing this in that way. So I engaged with the desire that the Father had shown me and expanded the moment that I was in, outworked all the months of stuff that I was led to do, and then contracted back to that moment and was aware of what I'd done, but it was only at that moment that just passed. Now that moment was expanded to months and contracted back to the moment. And I still remained and still had the memory of what had happened in that expanded moment. But I didn't have to do it in normal months of time, which I would have thought I would have had to done before. So I learned how to cooperate and work with time in a way which brought about a different way of being and a reality, which enabled me to expand that conscious awareness and that conscious state to multi-dimensional reality and no limitations. There's limitless grace and limitless empowerment to prosper and succeed and fulfill whatever God has within my destiny to fulfill, without me being 24 hours a day trying to fit it all in. All that I fit into this sort of dimension, is the time I spend with people, which is normal time frame, because it would be really difficult to engage in a different reality time frame if anyone else couldn't. So you're sort of, engaging in a way, in a sort of normal, natural way, because that's what enables everyone to engage it. If I need to do something beyond the time that I actually have physically, then I know how to manage time to enable me to have everything I need, all that I need at all times and purposes for everything that I'm mandated to do. And I think the key in it is we only do what we see the Father doing. So we only really need to be aware of what the Father is consciously revealing to us. Everything else, I think, is a subconscious level, at a spiritual level of heart to heart, mind to mind, with him, that just we then outwork his heart all the time without having to even consider it once we live in that state of being. So it is a completely different way. It's a different reality. I'm able to engage my mind in all different levels of wavelengths of function without having to be aware of them. So I can operate in alpha and beta and theta and delta and gamma waves, that my brain has access to all of these perspectives, but I'm only really aware of the beta in normal everyday life. But I am benefiting from the flow of alpha waves and the flow of theta waves and the flow of spiritual instinct and understanding and everything. But I don't have to sit there and think, try and work it all out. It's just how I live, which is such a joy. It's such a joy. And I thank God that he took me through the pathway of teaching me all the things I now know, so that I can be in that state, and enjoy life in a totally different way than I was doing before, really.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay.
It's been very helpful, Mike. Thank you for that. You were talking about the dark cloud, and I think where I am in my progress is that daily activation, really intentionally attempting to engage and to grow in that. Can you share a little bit more about the dark cloud and that experience that you had?
Well, the dark cloud was a process that I went in to engage God face to face, and he hides himself within a dark cloud to protect us so that we can access his actual presence in a way which would completely overwhelm or obliterate us in our mind, and we would probably just not be able to cope. So there's a sense where he prepares us for a level of relationship and face-to-face intimacy, which in the beginning I had no concept of at all. You know, I was engaged with the presence of God, and I was talking to him, and I was fellowshipping with him, but I didn't realize that there was a dimension to God that was beyond that. Therefore, my relationship was daily, my spirit and soul engaging in heaven, engaging with him, engaging in the garden of my heart, experiencing all of that, and then looking to outwork that. But my soul and spirit were connected wrongly to bring me into the freedom of how I'm now living in multidimensional things. Then my soul and spirit had to be separated and reintegrated. And I surrendered to the process eventually. For that separation and reintegration to take place, you know, I'd heard of the separation of soul and spirit. Obviously, it's in Hebrews, and Ian Clayton's done teaching on it, but I just didn't resonate with the teaching that he did, because it just seemed hard and harsh on the soul. I'm going to separate it. I'm going to take an axe to it, and I'm going to, you know, and I just didn't relate to that at all. And it felt like abuse of the soul for you know, God gave me this is who I am. So, but the soul shouldn't be in charge and controlling things. The spirit, with the Holy Spirit being one spirit, is meaning my soul, spirit, body are all in union and oneness, cooperation. So he knew that I wasn't at that state. So my soul was, to a degree, tethered to my spirit on a short leash. We would go in, come back out, and my spirit couldn't stay there. But God wanted me to live in that realm in a multidimensional way. So he had to start the process of my soul giving up and surrendering my rights to control or to choose my own way of doing it. And I went through this process in which, you know, God showed me a dark cloud. I was in a dark cloud a number of times during worship. I wasn't frightened, but I just couldn't find my way. It was so thick, couldn't see anything. So it was like, so I thought, I must be in the dark cloud. I'm going to go and see God. But I didn't know how to get there or do it. They were just experiences. Then God gave me this sort of challenge to spend 4 months with him, in which I thought I was going to, you know, go into, you know, all sorts of realms of the spirit that, as I'd done before, go further and deeper and higher and everything else. And then when it came to it, he just took me into a place of complete darkness. You know, I couldn't see, I couldn't hear anything particularly. I was able to sense very limitedly. You know, my soul reacted very strongly to that, in that my soul needed to understand what was going on. And I needed to, why are you doing this, God? Why can't I see? Why won't you show me? Why can't I hear anything? And all I really got over those 4 months was be still. I think wait, rest, and wait expectantly. And that's all the sense I got in 4 months. And my soul, for the first 6 weeks or so, just was out of control. And I think what God did during that process for me is remove the power that my spirit had in bringing some sense of government into my life, remove that to let the soul operate so I could sense what it was really like. And I thought I trusted God implicitly. I realized I trusted God when I knew what he was doing. I didn't know what he was doing in this instance, so my soul kicked off big time, needing to know. And I desperately needed to know. And I told God in no uncertain terms that this was not fair, and how he was treating me was not good. And I needed to know. And why wouldn't he not show me? And why did he ask me to come into this place if he wasn't going to meet with me? And, you know, it was like, you know, I was like a petulant child. You know, my soul just basically lost the plot and, you know, reacted towards God in a very accusatory way. And eventually I got to the point where I was fed up with it, you know, and it was just so hard. And I was like, just give up. I surrender. but I didn't mean it. I just wanted it over. You know, I hadn't really got to the point of total surrender. I'm going to trust you, God. If I never, ever know what you're doing, I love you. You love me. I'm going to trust you. I don't need to know anymore. And but I got to that point and I did surrender. And he then took me through a process of preparing my soul for that separation and reintegration to bring me into wholeness. And then he did it. And in doing it, he brought me back into a state of wholeness, connected my spirit to my soul correctly, quantumly. The next time I went into the realms of heaven, the next day, I never came back out spiritually. And all of a sudden, he was able to show me and take me and lead me into sonship in a way that I would have never been able to do with my soul still wrongly connected to my spirit, drawing life for independence. So my soul was getting its identity from what I was doing. And I was doing the things God wanted me to do, actually in the way that God had wired me to do them, which seemed really unfair that I was being sort of challenged over the way he made me. But the way he made me was in control. That was the issue. My soul needed to know. My soul needed to do those things for validation. And my soul was getting its validation identity from what it was doing. Now my identity came from who God said I was and from my relationship with him rather than what I was doing. But of course, I was able to do way, way more than I was doing before, but from a different perspective and from a completely different framework of thinking. And now I didn't need to do anything to show who I was. I knew who I was and got to know who I was at a deeper level purely through heart-to-heart sort of communication with the Father, who revealed my sonship and revealed my identity and showed me, you know, how I was living was not how he intended me to live. And eventually that led into the multidimensional way of being able to be operating multiple dimensions in multiple places at, you know, all at the same time. But I couldn't do that when my soul was tethered to my spirit in such a way that the soul had dominion. Although my spirit was strong, the soul still had dominion because it was tethered. And if my chose to come out of heaven, my spirit had to come with me because it wasn't connected in such a way that I could be there in two places. But everyone's experience is probably different. Everyone's what they need separation from or for is different, you know, and everyone's redemptive gift is different. So the things that are, you know, who they really are and how that's at work would be different. So some people would be servants, some people would be rulers, some people would be givers, some people would be grace, you know, mercy gift, you know, and therefore what they were doing was tied to who they were, but they still may have been getting identity from their mercy acts or from their giving or from their, you know, understanding, you know, in a sense, you know, my prophetic teaching redemptive gift led me to want to understand how everything worked and want to teach people to understand it. That was how I was wired, but I was getting my identity from that rather than who God said I was. So that's what had to fundamentally change.
Most helpful.
You know, but it was, you know, everyone's different, you know, and everyone's journey is different. And for me, this was triggered when God invited me into a process of taking me into a consummation of our relationship in intimacy. He took me from the garden of my heart to the dance floor, to the soaking room, to the bridal chamber. And this was the soaking room part. You know, I'd gone through the sense of knowing I was loved. I'd gone through the sense of connecting with my destiny, but I needed this preparation so I could live in a way which enabled me to fulfill who I was, which I would have never have done without that separation and reintegration. Everything changed really at that moment in a huge way. And then I went on another, you know, journey of deconstruction eventually. You know, I had 4 years really that God sort of prepared my heart in that intimacy of revelation of him, of who I was, to get me to the point where I was willing to allow total deconstruction of my belief systems, which were based on my upbringing and my religious programming and everything else. I needed that intimacy level so that I would be able to let go of everything that I thought was true. So God just took me on this journey, and there was many different milestones and things on the journey that brought me to the place. It wasn't just one, but the dark cloud, which went from November to February 2011 to 12, was one of the most significant points on my journey that changed me dramatically in terms of the separation of soul and spirit and becoming whole and one. And then I opened up my spirit, soul, and body to work together for the revelation of the Merkaba and the energy gates and all of that, which I had no idea about back in 2011-12. But it was all part of God's, I guess, plan to bring me into maturity. And I needed to be transformed, have my mind renewed, and have this sort of level of intimacy and that he wanted me to enter into. So eventually I did get to see God face to face. I did enter into the bridal chamber, if you like, and met him at a whole different level. Initially, even that, it was like a fraction of a second, because it was like so bright and overwhelming and amazing that I couldn't cope. But eventually I now dwell there. I could manage a microsecond initially, and 10 years later, I'm dwelling in that light of perfection, face to face, all the time. So there's been a huge shift in my ability to be able to live and dwell in the manifest presence of God, and in his person and who he really is, in that sense. So it's been a long journey, but I look back and see the dark cloud, and that whole journey was a big thing, and eventually I did a whole conference on it, sort of intensive conference on the dark cloud as part of the Sun's Arise series of conferences. And there was a whole thing of going through what that dark cloud was and all of what it meant for me, and help other people experience it for themselves when God was wanting to take them through it. I don't think it's the same for everyone or the same time for everyone. It's when it is, now hearing my testimony, hopefully people will surrender quicker than I did, and that's the thing here. I didn't know what was going on, and it was like I resisted and fought against it, rather than giving in and surrendering quickly. It took me weeks, 6 or 7 weeks or so to surrender. If I knew what was going on, I probably could have surrendered earlier. But actually, that was the point. Was I willing to surrender when I didn't know what was going on? And that was the key for me. For me, that was the issue. I had to come to the point where I don't need to know. And I really meant that. And God knew I meant it. And that was what brought about the change, really.
Do you ever get, every once in a while, that just the nagging thought in the back of your mind, you're really not doing enough?
No.
Do you ever get hit with that?
Not anymore, because I am aware that I'm doing way more than I could have ever possibly imagined and thought. And then in this realm, I am led and only wanting to do what the Father is really sort of unveiling to me, which means I don't ever feel guilty or obliged or obligated to do anything. And people might ask me to do stuff or pressurize me to do stuff, and it's like, well, no, I don't feel led to do that. So I'm probably doing less in this Christian-y type stuff, in day-to-day life than I would have been in the past. But I don't feel it, but I'm doing multiple times more in the spirit realm, which is more important. So but then God does open things up for you at times, and you sense, does this have the frequency of God on it? If it does, then I'll do it. I was in a small group. We were having lunch in a small group in this lady's house. And I was sitting next to this person and ended up talking to them. And they were talking to me about what God was doing in them and what they had doing. And they were going to be doing some housing project. And I started saying, oh, I've got experience of that. You know, what are you doing? How are you doing it? And they were like, whoa, can you meet with me? Can you meet with our team? So I sort of checked it out with the Father. I didn't just say yes, because that would be me doing it in my own understanding. So I checked it out with the Father, and I felt the Father say, yeah, I want you to help them. So I said, yes, I'd be willing to meet with you. I gave my email address and phone number and said, get back to me, you know, when you're ready to meet. Well, I'm meeting with them on Friday. So for me, that is something that comes out of a divine appointment that God instigated, and I sensed him on it, so I went with it. So that's the sort of thing I would be more led to do than, oh, I need to be doing something every day, or I'm not doing enough, you know, because I'm aware of doing way more in the Spirit, but free not to just feel I need to fill my time. You know, I don't need to fill my time with a whole lot of extra stuff just because I've got the time to do it, you know, and I do have time. But at the moment, my priority is relationship time. So that's where my focus is in this season, is in continuing to build and establish relationship with the time that I have. And that's my priority. I'm sure that eventually may move into some other things, but I'm also coming to a point in life where I believe God wants me to enjoy the sort of rest for my labors, if you like, from the physical sense. But I am actually more active physically than I've ever been. So we have more walks together. I'm doing a lot of manual work, felling trees, chopping logs, cutting things down, digging things up. You know, I built a dry stone wall the other day, having dug a whole lot of rock out of this area and now turning it into a nice dry stone walled bed. I'm doing all sorts of stuff and enjoying it, and God enjoying it with me. But I'm not feeling any sense of, oh, I need to find more things to do. Because I'm in communion with the Father, and he's quite capable of leading me into anything he wants me to be involved in. And then if I feel that that's what he's leading me to, then of course I'll do it, you know. But there is no guilt, shame, or condemnation for me about anyone else thinking I should be doing more or whatever. You know, in a sense, I work for myself, in that I work for a company that I established, you know, which I own. So from that perspective, you know, I'm not really obliged to anyone, but I have made commitments to people and for mentoring and things, which I enjoy doing. And I don't feel any sense of God saying, I don't want you to do that at this minute. But if he ever did, then immediately I would say to people, well, God's brought this to an end now, and this is not what I'm going to be doing in that sense. And there might be times when I take periods of time out from doing that and focus on something else that God might want me to do for a period of time. But at the moment, I don't get any sense that he wants me to stop doing that. But again, you know, there were governmental groups that I were doing that I felt the Father wanted me to stop doing for particular reasons. And, you know, and I'm open to, you know, for whatever the Father will lead me into next, with the time I do have available. But no guilt or ever feeling, oh, I should be doing more. Because that would be me thinking probably that what I do determines something about myself, and my identity doesn't come from that. So no one can really challenge by saying, well, you're not doing enough, or you should be doing more of this, and you've got time on your hands, you should be helping here or helping there, or there's loads of people you could be helping. It's like, well, Jesus didn't help every single person. in Israel in the 3.5 years he was ministering. He didn't raise every single person who died from the grave. He didn't heal every single person who was sick. He healed those who came to him, or those that the Father gave him the permission to heal, I guess, which seemed to be probably everyone who came to him, but he didn't go to everybody. He didn't go to the hospitals or go out there looking for everyone who was sick just because he could heal them. He wanted to fulfill, because he had a higher purpose than that. That was part of the demonstration of the love of God and who the Father was. But he had a mission that he knew he was going to fulfill by taking our place and, taking us into death and bringing us into resurrection. So there was a higher purpose in that, which his disciples would have definitely stopped him going to fulfill if they could have done, So yeah, no, definitely no guilt over what I'm doing or not doing. Because guilt really is, you wouldn't be in rest and living in joy and peace if you were feeling guilty over, well, I'm not doing enough, and if I ever had I just go back to the Father and say, are you prompting me that this more that you'd like me to do? Then that's fine. But at the moment, I'm definitely, rejoicing and fellowshipping and having fun in life, without the need at this point in time to feel, there's a whole lot of new projects that, that I should be looking at or anything like that. And in one sense, God has actually got me to let go of a lot of things. I've just resigned from a number of legislative roles that I had within the governance of organizations, where I was a director and trustee of various organizations, where I felt the Father wanted me to let that go. And he's been leading me up to the last couple of years towards the point where I felt, no, now is the time to let go of this. There's another organization that I'm probably going to wind up and not necessarily need to be involved in. So there's, in that sense, God is getting me to let go of stuff rather than to actually get me to do more. No, that might be because eventually there'll be something different that he's got me to be involved in. I don't know. But I'm open for whatever it might be. But I'm not going to be driven by my need to feel I need to do something, or anyone else's projection onto me that you should be doing this or this or this, because I'm not going to be driven by any inner need of self-identification or identity, or any external need to please people. I'm not here to people please, so people can think I should be doing all sorts of things, but I'm not going to, unless I really get a clear sense that the Father's really leading me into that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to thank you for being a forerunner and for going ahead of us. It really does help navigate these mysteries. So I just say thank you again, Mike.
You're welcome. And sometimes it's like, that role, I'm aware that is a role that I've had, but I also need to be aware that there are times where you have to get out of the way. I am not the door through what people go through. Jesus is that door. I'm just pointing to the fact that there's a door here, or you can go through here, or you can access here, having found one. But, as I've just sort of stopped being involved in the governmental meetings, it was part of that was I don't want to be a hindrance or an obstacle to people learning how to do things for themselves, because it's easy to rely on someone who knows what they're doing and to let them facilitate doing it. And I felt actually having 2 years of done enough facilitating and mentoring in this type of environment, in the government environment, actually, I don't want to be a blockage to people learning to go further and do their own thing in that, because they're, deferring to me. So there's definitely a sense where a forerunner has to be careful that they don't become a cork in the bottle or a blockage, that there's a limitation placed on things because, of me. I'm very aware that it's not me that I'm looking to people to engage with. They're looking to engage with God, and I'm helping people to find their own relationship with God. And sometimes you have to get out of the way of that and make sure that they're not becoming dependent on you, because that's the very last thing I would want to do. And therefore, that's why I stopped a lot of personal ministry to people, because I didn't want people to think, well, I'm the only one they can go to, or I'm the only one who can do this, or I'm the only one who could pray over them or prophesy over them. It's like, no, I'm not going to be prophesying, telling you what God is saying, when God is wanting you to go and engage for it yourself so you can hear him saying it. Otherwise, it becomes a sort of self-defeating thing. So I'm sort of very aware of the role of a forerunner. At times, you have to say, go further. I'm stepping out of the way here to let you go further, or I may go and pursue something else that God is leading me towards, and maybe I'll share and open that opportunity for people to say, hey, there's more over here. But, I'm really wanting them not to make sure they don't follow me as a forerunner, but follow where God is leading this journey into. But it is a privilege to be able to engage with God and to be able to share that with others, to help inspire them that there's more, which is really what it's about for me. There is more. And if I can encourage people to see there's more and pursue that more, then I will feel that, I fulfilled some of what God is who I am in that sense. So yeah, it is good to have forerunners, but also to realize that everyone ultimately is going to possess the land, their own inheritance. It isn't only the few. The Joshua generation, if you like, are there as forerunners for the rest of the world, in that sense, of the children of God to come into their identity and inheritance as sons. And for that to take place, you've got to realize that you are no different as anybody else in one sense. You just have a role that you fulfill. And I'm very aware that you've got to be careful not to create some sort of hierarchical structure, or even sort of a sense of, well, forerunners are better, or they're more special to God. Actually, forerunners is hard being a forerunner, and you've got to make the way and find the way, and it's not an easy thing to do. So I don't think it's an easy thing, and it isn't something which I think God makes it easy for forerunners, because he definitely doesn't. But in reality, I'm happy to be who God made me to be and help other people to find where they are. But in some way, I think everyone will be a forerunner. If you're part of the Joshua generation, then you are a forerunner, but you will connect with people that I can't. That's the key. There's 5 other people here who can then connect with many more people than I can, and therefore you will be a forerunner to them. So there's always somebody to reach and engage and help on the journey, without having to think, well, we're the only ones. It's like, if I am not helping other people be forerunners, then I'm not really doing a forerunner role. And if you suddenly get to the point where, well, I'm the forerunner and everyone else is just following, then I think that attitude really is not the right attitude to have. And I'd much rather just get out of the way and let people then go further and into the spheres that they are operating in, which is not, won't be mine. But there are so many more. All of you have the potential for reaching how many people within your spheres, and then helping those people reach their spheres, and eventually seeing the kingdom infiltrate like leaven into the whole lump, bit by bit, person by person, as we share and help people into the relationship that God has for them and into their identity, which is, a wonderful thing to do to help see people find their identity is great.